Welcome to this episode of the Triple F podcast, which is Faith, Family, and Freedom, with my co-host, Jim Hochberg. And we're going to be talking about what's happening right now on the issue of abortion, because it's kind of rearing its ugly head in a couple of different areas. And we want to talk about that. So let's chat about that. So Jim, let's talk about three things that I think that sometimes these things fall under the radar, because people are talking about COVID, right? And they're talking about COVID lockdowns and COVID restrictions. And so sometimes they just kind of skim over some of the other stuff that's happening. And one of the things that's very interesting that just happened this week is President Biden, he rescinded an administrative order that Trump had established in 2019. And basically that administrative order back in 2019, it removed any federal funding from anybody who provided abortions. Now, it didn't stop abortions from happening. It just meant that they couldn't get federal funds.
They couldn't be doing the abortion and the non-abortion in the same place.
They were very clear about the referrals, right? So they could talk about abortion, but if they were referring for abortions, then they would not receive federal funding. And I want to just point out that when I looked up the research, because again, we always want to make sure we're giving the proper information, that there was a 2021 report that was done by the Government Accountability Office. And what that is, it's a nonpartisan office. It's an arm in Congress. And they were asked to give a report on Planned Parenthood funding. And so this report was done in June of 2021. And this report talks about the 39 Planned Parenthood affiliates and how much they spent. And this report it was presented to members of Congress, so all of your congressional members know about this. They spent over $271 million of federal grants from 2016 to 2018, and that doesn't include the Medicaid reimbursements. So Trump comes along and he does this administrative order and he says no more federal funding. And everybody should remember there was a lot of craziness that happened because Trump did that. Everybody was threatening to do lawsuits. Now you fast forward under the administration of President Biden, and he has now rescinded that administrative order. And as you can well imagine, Planned Parenthood is very excited about this.
Well, and so there's three publications that we're talking about today. One of them is published in the New York Times. And if everybody took a step back from their political persuasion on the issue of abortion and just said to each other, I can love you as a person, even if you're a proponent of abortion, or I can love you as a person if you're an opponent of abortion. Abortion isn't the end all and the be all of life or afterlife, except for the aborted baby, of course. But if we could do that and we read these articles, we'd see the choice of words revealing the article's author's predisposition and bias. Yeah. And yeah. For instance, in the first sentence of this New York Times article, Biden officials end ban on abortion referrals at federally funded clinics. The first sentence says the Biden administration on Monday reversed a contentious policy set under President Donald J. Trump that barred organizations that provide abortion referrals from receiving federal family planning money. Now, it's only a contentious position if you disagree with it. Because if you agree with it, it's not very contentious at all. It's actually quite peaceful. You're at peace with it because it's a good idea. So who is this guy? Noah Weiland at the New York Times is showing that he's not very good at news writing because he's biased.
Well, what you're seeing, and I think everybody has a problem with this. Now, I don't care what side of the fence you sit. I think people are all annoyed now that news reporting is no longer news reporting. Well, it's news reported. It's under the guise of news reporting, but what it really is I've got an opinion and I want to change your mind about it. And if you don't agree with me, I'm going to call you names, because that's really what has started to happen. I mean,
So
when
that was a 20-word description of a one-word definition. It's called propaganda.
Propaganda. And it's so funny for anybody who took media or reporting as you did back in college at the University of Hawaii. You were taught not to bring that kind of stuff into your reporting. You were supposed to report the news, the truth, right? And stick to the truth, but that doesn't happen anymore. But I do want to go back to something you said. So on the issue of abortion, you can have very close friends that hang out together. They both support women. They support equality for women, in the sense if a woman is doing the same job as a man, then she should be, paid the same amount of money, and they may agree on all that kind of stuff. But where I think that we shouldn't let people bully us is if we don't support abortion, we should not be forced to have to pay for it. I think that is really, really wrong. And to show that people's opinions change all the time, I want to quote President Biden back in 2007 in a book, Promises to Keep. And this is on pages 104 to 105 of this book by President Biden. And he was asked about his position on federal funding of abortion. And he goes on to say that he supports a woman's right to choose. He does talk about being Catholic, but he says this: I remember vividly the first time in 1973 I had to go to the floor to vote on abortion. A fellow senator asked how I would vote. My position is that I am personally opposed to abortion, but I don't think I have a right to impose my view on the rest of society. I've thought a lot about it, and my position probably doesn't please everyone. I think the government should stay out completely. I will not vote to overturn the court's decision. I will not vote to curtail a woman's right to choose abortion. But I will also not vote to use federal funds to fund abortion. So he's clear, at least in 2007, that although he was supporting abortion rights and women's right to choose and whatever the vernacular was of the day, he made it clear that he was opposed to the federal funding of abortion. Now, you fast forward, he is now president of the United States, and some would argue that he has become one of the most anti-life president that we've had.
And in terms of politicians changing their minds, the 1990s was a period when proponents of same-sex marriage had to use the courts because there were no politicians in elected office that supported same-sex marriage. And now practically all the Democrats do. But there's another interesting thing in that New York Times article. And what it says is, as a result of the Trump rule, when Trump was in office, before the rule got changed by President Biden, Planned Parenthood, which had received roughly $60 million a year through Title X programs, not Medicaid, but family planning, they withdrew from the program rather than comply with the requirements. Now, here's interesting. Before 2019, the Planned Parenthood health centers served roughly 40% of the 4 million people who use Title X programs. So if 40% of 4 million is, because I did the math, 1,600,000 people, and they spent $60 million of Title X money on that 1,600,000 people, that was $37.50 a person. So they don't get most of their money from Title X. They get it from doing abortions.
Yeah, if you look at that report, which I'll try to do the link that I mentioned earlier, you will see that they have a breakdown, and the percentage of money is definitely that they get is to do abortion or what they call family planning. So yeah, let's be clear about that. Okay, so the second thing that, again, might have flown under the radar for a lot of people is that on Friday last week, the House of Representatives passed a legislation that basically it expands the scope of abortion rights. No Republicans voted for it, and there was one Democrat who actually voted against it. This bill is very dangerous, and the bill is going to protect some of the state level restrictions, such as the bans on mandatory waiting periods, limits on when during a pregnancy an abortion can be performed. It permits limits on the healthcare provider and their ability to administer abortion services, such as the abortion pill, telemedicine, and other limits on telehealth that they follow. The bill right now, as it stands, is heading over to the Senate. It probably doesn't have the votes to pass in the Senate. It will be a very close vote, but it goes to show you that the House has its mind set on allowing Planned Parenthood to continue its services and to actually make sure that they get enough funding to do so.
So my take on this article is a little bit broader than just the abortion question, because what it shows is that the Democrats that are currently in Congress really want to federalize abortion. Roe v. Wade, Doe v. Bolton, and Casey, Supreme Court decisions on abortion did not federalize abortion. They just said if the states are going to enact restrictions or limitations or safeguards, they can't unduly burden the woman's right to obtain an abortion during the period of time that she freely can have it, which is essentially the first trimester if the abortionists are following good medicine. So states have done that. And there's some very strong restrictions that are currently going to be looked at by the US Supreme Court. And these Democrat congressmen do not want the Supreme Court making the decision. It's interesting how they've been loving the Supreme Court protection of their position, but they are unwilling to allow the Supreme Court to continue ruling on the issues that come up. They want to federalize it. But here's an interesting thing. The Democrats also want to federalize our police force. They want to have, they're defunding city and county and state police forces through cutting funding. And they're seeing a rise in crime and the need for more police. And they're now asking that Congress create a federal police force, which we are never supposed to have in this country, ever. And it's even being done by Merrick Garland, the Attorney General of the United States, who's going to have the FBI and the US attorneys now investigating, charging, and prosecuting parents that go to school board meetings to complain about what their children are being taught in local county school systems. This country is supposed to be governed at the smallest, most local level. And the Democrats currently in Congress want to do everything from the federal level, so it's the same everywhere, and the control is not what the people in those areas want.
Yeah, it's very scary what's happening. And then if you think about the other big topic right now, which is the budget bill, right? The budget reconciliation bill, the massive spending bill, the infrastructure, everything they're throwing everything in the kitchen sink into this bill. So you have people that are like, yeah, but we got to fix the roads. We've got to do all this stuff. And that's true. And I think most people agree that there are and should be funding to go to these kind of things. But when you drill down, well, first of all, to get a copy of the actual bill is near to impossible because it isn't there yet. They're discussing what's going to be included in there. So no one can actually look to see what this all is going to entail. So you have to be paying attention to all these things people are saying, well, this is going to be in there and we want to ask for this. And you have to kind of see between the sides, who's asking for what. And one of the things that is missing is the Hyde Amendment. And what that means is, wait, what does abortion or the ability to get one or not get one or funding of abortion, what is that doing in an infrastructure bill? And this is one of the things that Senator Joe Manchin is absolutely angry that the Hyde Amendment has been removed when it's been on the books for a long time, since the 1970s. And the fact that you have people like Speaker Pelosi and liberal progressives who are saying, no, 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 that's got to come out. This is what we should be asking our senators and our representatives is, why are we talking about that when you're telling us that there's an infrastructure problem that needs to be taken care of in various ways? And I think we're willing to come to the table and talk about any infrastructure problems you have, but not if you're going to throw it in a massive bill like this.
Okay, and so my approach to this article is we're seeing what the Democrats in Congress think about people who disagree with them. When Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolton in 1973 legalized abortion nationally, it was no longer appropriate politically to outlaw abortion, according to the language in those two cases. What happened is most of the people that were not radical pro-abortionists at that time did not want tax money used to pay for abortion. And that's what the Hyde Amendment was. And the congressman by the name of Hyde put it in shortly after 1973, and it's been in every single spending bill ever, because that is if the Supreme Court was going to require that pregnant women be permitted to obtain abortions, there was not going to be tax money spent on it, because every pro-life taxpayer doesn't want to pay for abortions. If your perspective is that abortion murders a baby in the womb, you don't want to be paying for it. And that's the way this has been taken care of for decades, 50 years.
I know, and I think it drives me crazy, because when I talk to people that have a difference of opinion on this, they always tell me, well, you're not, if you don't want an abortion, don't get one. But this is beyond that now, because I don't think that someone who was not a Christian would be okay with federal dollars going in to ensure that everybody was given the opportunity to accept Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. Nobody should be forced to pay for something that they disagree with. And something like abortion is so intrinsically deep in some of us that have that faith-based foundation for what we do. We don't want to be forced to pay for it. And the fact that our government is willing to shove it down our throat should be a concern to all of us.
Well, and my last point on that is because it's really important that people own the government. Every listener, every viewer of this show is an owner of the government. And for too long, what we've been doing is thinking of the federal government, the state government, the county government, like we think about the car in our neighbor's carport. It's just somebody else's thing. It's not my thing. And I think what we need to do as pro-life citizens is contact Senator Manchin's office and thank him for standing up for the pro-life position on use of taxpayer money for abortions. Because if he holds fast, the Senate might not have at least the 50 votes they need to allow the vice president to cast the deciding vote. And so I would like to encourage people, and maybe we can put up the contact info, to call his office and thank him for being a voice for the unborn, excuse me, with respect to tax funds.
All right. Well, those are our topics for abortion on what's kind of been happening. So we want to make sure that you like this video, that you share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to Hawaii Family Forum and hit that notification button. So every time we upload a new video, you're going to know about it. So thanks for hanging in there. Thanks, Jim.
Aloha.